Hachiko Sela Muchama, hands where I can see them.
Okay, what is this even about?
The checks pulled from the mail on your routes?
That was nothing. That was a bank.
This is Hachiko Sela Muchimba, a U.S. Postal Service letter carrier in Washington, D.C. The bank cameras caught him making deposits in his USPS uniform. By the time agents found him, he was at Dulles Airport trying to board a flight out of the country.
The bank mix-up. Everybody keeps acting like I stole something.
More than 30 routes and over 1 million.
That number is way off. Whoever gave you that is making it sound bigger than it ever was.
He never made it onto the plane. Federal agents intercepted him at the Dulles jet bridge before the cabin door closed, and within 72 hours, investigators would unwind a 28-month theft operation spanning more than 30 federal mail routes. $1.6 million in stolen checks. 100,000 of it dropped at gentlemen's clubs in Northern Virginia. A United States citizenship sworn on a lie. By the time the verdict came down, the same federal government that had welcomed him as a citizen would take that citizenship back. Pay attention to the number you just heard. $1.6 million pulled from the mailboxes of regular people who trusted a uniform. I want your reaction in the comments when you hear how it ended. And if you're new here, subscribe. We break down how these schemes actually work, and we cover cases like this every single week. Hachiko Sela Muchimba was born in 1980 in the Republic of Zambia in the Copperbelt province, where the country's mining economy had shaped 2 generations of his family. His father worked the smelters in Ndola. His mother taught primary school. There were 5 children in the household, and Hachiko Sela was the second oldest, the one expected to set the example. The Copperbelt in the 1980s was not poor in the way Americans imagine African poverty. It was working class. Concrete block homes with corrugated metal roofs, school uniforms pressed every morning by hand, boys playing soccer in the dirt lot behind the parish church, then running home for dinner before the streetlights came on. By every account his teachers were able to give later, Hachiko Sela was a steady student, not exceptional, not troubled, quiet, polite, the kind of child who finished his work and waited. He left Zambia in his late 20s. The path was the same one thousands of educated Africans had taken before him. A student visa to the United States in 2008. A 2-year community college program in business administration at Northern Virginia Community College's Alexandria campus. Adjustment of status. A green card sponsored through employment at a logistics company that operated a warehouse outside Beltsville. By 2013, he was a lawful permanent resident living in a small apartment off New Hampshire Avenue, working overnight shifts on a loading bay, and sending money home every 2 weeks through a Western Union counter on Georgia Avenue. Friends from that period described him the same way his teachers had. Quiet, disciplined. The kind of man who kept his receipts in a binder and called his mother on Sundays. He was not flashy. He drove a 2006 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. He ate at the same Ethiopian restaurant in Adams Morgan 3 nights a week, because the owner gave him a standing discount and remembered his order. He attended a Pan-African community group that met in a basement off 16th Street, and he sat in the back, and he rarely spoke. In 2016, he applied to the United States Postal Service. The application was not a casual one. The USPS hires through a centralized exam called the Postal Service 474. Candidates are tested on accuracy, address checking, situational judgment, and personality assessment. Background checks run for weeks. Fingerprints are submitted to the FBI. Drug screens are mandatory. The hiring panel reviewed his work history, his immigration paperwork, his references, and his exam score. And they offered him a city carrier assistant position at a starting wage of $17.29 an hour. His first assignment was a relief carrier in Northeast Washington. He rotated through 5 different routes in his first 8 months. Supervisors at the station wrote that he was punctual, courteous with customers, and absorbed the route geography unusually quickly. One evaluation called him a model new hire. Another noted that he had memorized the apartment building access codes for 6 high-rises in his swing area within 3 weeks of starting. In 2019, he was promoted to a full-time regular carrier and assigned permanently to the Friendship Heights station on Wisconsin Avenue Northwest, one of the most affluent delivery zones in the District of Columbia. The customers on his new routes lived in cooperative apartment buildings with doormen, in standalone houses on Western Avenue, in condominium complexes along Wisconsin and Jennifer Street. They were retired diplomats, federal judges, World Bank consultants, lobbyists, partners at white shoe law firms. Mail volume was steady. Check volume, especially treasury checks for retirees and tax refunds for high earners, was unusually heavy. He had been trusted with the mail of one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the United States. He had passed every test the federal government could give him. That trust was about to become the vulnerability. The United States Postal Service moves more than 400 million pieces of mail every business day. Inside that volume, paper checks remain one of the most concentrated forms of value in the American economy. Treasury checks, tax refunds, Social Security supplements, personal checks for rent, for tuition, for medical bills, for inheritance distributions, for trust payouts. They move through the same blue envelopes and white windowed sleeves as junk mail and grocery circulars, and they rely entirely on a single assumption. The assumption is that the letter carrier who picks them up at the station in the morning will deliver them to the mailbox of the person whose name is on the envelope. The workday at the Friendship Heights station begins before sunrise. Carriers arrive at the loading dock between 5:30 and 6 in the morning. They case their mail, which is the postal term for sorting the bundles into walk sequence on a tall metal cabinet at their assigned position. They scan their accountable items, the registered letters and signature required pieces. They load their long-life vehicle, the boxy aluminum truck familiar to every American street, and they leave the station around 8. For the next 6 to 8 hours, the carrier is alone. There is no supervisor in the truck. There is no body camera. There is no GPS log of which mailboxes were opened. The postal vehicle's tracker records location, but not action. The carrier holds in his hands, every single day, hundreds of pieces of mail addressed to other people. Some of those pieces contain checks. The carrier knows which ones do. The envelopes are recognizable. Bank envelopes are recognizable. Treasury envelopes are unmistakable, with their pale green tint and the distinctive watermark visible against the light. The check clearing system on the receiving end is similarly built on trust. When a check is deposited by mobile app or at a bank teller, the bank verifies the endorsement on the back, runs the routing number, and credits the account, often the same day for amounts under a federal threshold. The original payee, the name printed on the front of the check, is rarely verified against the depositor's identification unless the check is over $10,000 or the depositing account is new. For a letter carrier with a checking account, a smartphone, and a willingness to write a name on the back of an envelope, the entire architecture of federal mail security came down to one question. Would he do it? For more than 30 months, the answer was yes. The first deposit came in December 2020, a $2,400 U.S. Treasury check, originally addressed to a retiree in the 4000 block of Jennifer Street Northwest, was endorsed on the reverse in handwriting that did not match the payee. The name written on the endorsement line was Hachikosela Muchimba. The check was deposited through a mobile app to a personal checking account he had held at a Bank of America branch on Connecticut Avenue since 2014. It cleared. No one called, no one noticed, no one checked. 11 days later, he did it again. This time, a private party check for $4,150, intended for a customer on Western Avenue. Same endorsement, same account, same result. By the end of January 2021, he had stolen and deposited 11 separate checks totaling just under $38,000. By March, he had crossed $75,000. By the summer of 2021, more than $190,000 had moved from envelopes addressed to his customers into accounts he controlled. The method was clinical. On his cased mail each morning, he scanned for the distinctive markers: the pale green of a treasury envelope, the watermark of a bank windowed sleeve, the slight rigidity of a folded check inside a personal letter. He pulled those pieces out of the bundle before he left the station, sometimes tucking them into the inside pocket of his uniform jacket, sometimes into a manila folder he kept on the driver's seat of his truck. At the end of his shift, he returned to the station, clocked out, drove to his apartment, and processed the checks. He used a black ballpoint pen to draw a single line through the printed payee name on the front, wrote his own name above it, and signed the back. For treasury checks, where alteration of the front would draw attention, he simply forged a third-party endorsement, writing the payee's name in block letters, and then signing his own name below as the secondary endorser. He used 4 different bank accounts across 3 institutions, rotating deposits to keep individual account activity below internal review thresholds. He used the mobile deposit feature for amounts under $5,000. For anything larger, he walked into a branch. Surveillance footage from the Bank of America branch at Friendship Heights, 2 blocks from his assigned station, captured him at the teller window on at least 19 separate occasions across 2021 and 2022. In some of those clips, the timestamp showed him entering the lobby less than 40 minutes after his shift had ended. In some, his uniform jacket had been removed. In others, it had not. The blue USPS shirt was visible. The patch was visible. The Postal Service eagle on the breast pocket was visible. He was depositing stolen federal mail in the uniform of the agency he had stolen it from. By the end of 2021, he had taken more than $400,000. The lifestyle changed. The 2006 Civic was traded in for a late-model luxury sedan. The Adams Morgan apartment was upgraded to a 1-bedroom condominium in a doorman building off 16th Street. He flew to Dubai in January 2022. He stayed at a 4-star hotel on Sheikh Zayed Road for 9 nights. He flew to South Africa in March. He flew to Zambia in June. Hotel bookings, charged to debit cards drawn from the laundered accounts, totaled more than $46,000 across a single 18-month window. And then there were the clubs. Federal investigators would later document $100,000 in cash withdrawals and direct payments to gentlemen's clubs in Northern Virginia and the District of Columbia between July 2021 and February 2023. Some of the receipts were itemized. Some were sequenced 2 or 3 nights a week. One single Saturday in November 2022 showed $9,400 in withdrawals at 3 different ATMs inside the same club between 10 in the evening and 2 in the morning. No one at the postal station noticed. No one at the bank flagged the deposits. The customers on his routes noticed something, but not what. They noticed the checks were not arriving. The first complaints reached the Friendship Heights station in the spring of 2022. A retiree on 46th Street called to report that his quarterly Treasury annuity check had not arrived. The station logged the complaint and issued a trace. 2 weeks later, a real estate attorney on Western Avenue called about a settlement check from a closing that had been mailed and never received. Then a tax refund. Then a dividend check. Then a private party check from a relative on a birthday card. By July 2022, the Friendship Heights station had logged 43 customer reports of missing checks across a 6-month window. The volume was unusual, but each individual report was handled the same way. A trace was opened. A duplicate was requested from the issuer. The customer was apologized to. The investigation, on the station's side, stopped there. But across the river in Arlington, a separate office was beginning to ask different questions. The Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration runs an automated analytics program that flags Treasury check endorsements against the registered payee names. For most years, the program processes millions of checks with no alerts. In the fall of 2022, the program began returning a recurring anomaly. A single endorser name was appearing on Treasury checks made out to dozens of unrelated payees, all of them with mailing addresses inside a single postal zone in Northwest Washington. The endorser's name was Hachikosela Muchimba. The anomaly was forwarded to the United States Postal Service Office of Inspector General in November 2022. A case agent was assigned. The agent pulled the carrier roster for the Friendship Heights station, cross-checked it against the flagged endorser name, and confirmed within an hour that Muchimba was a current full-time letter carrier on the very routes corresponding to the missing check complaints. The investigation opened formally in December 2022. By that point, Muchimba had been stealing for 2 years. He had been a United States citizen for 9 months, and he had no idea that the federal government was already inside his bank records. The investigation is open. The bank footage is being pulled. We are about to walk through exactly how federal investigators built this case and what they found in his luggage the night he tried to fly to Zambia. If this kind of accountability reporting is what you came here for, subscribe and stay with me. We do not look away from these stories. The investigation that closed on Hachikosala Muchimba was not one agency. It was 4. The United States Postal Service Office of Inspector General handled the mail theft side. The Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration handled the check fraud analytics. Homeland Security Investigations, the criminal arm of the Department of Homeland Security, brought in the money laundering and international travel components. And United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, the agency that had administered his oath of allegiance in 2022, was pulled in once the case agent realized what was sitting at the bottom of his application file. The first piece of evidence the investigators built the case around was the bank surveillance footage. Agents subpoenaed records from Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Capital One. They pulled deposit videos from 19 separate dates between March 2021 and December 2022. In 13 of those clips, Muchimba was visibly wearing a U.S. Postal Service uniform. In 4 of them, he was carrying a postal scanner clipped to his belt. In one of them, the date and time stamp showed him at the teller window at 3:47 in the afternoon, depositing a check for $9,200, exactly 40 minutes after his scanner records showed him finishing a delivery route that included the home of the check's original payee. The second piece was the endorsement analysis. A handwriting examiner from the U.S. Secret Service Forensic Laboratory compared the endorsement signatures on 342 recovered checks against Muchimba's exemplars from his postal employment file and his naturalization application. 311 were a match. The remaining 31 were forged endorsements of the original payee, but the secondary signature, the deposit endorser, was Muchimba's in every case. The third was the account records. Investigators traced 1.6 million, 51,000, and change in fraudulent deposits across the 4 accounts he controlled. They traced the money out. International wire transfers to Stanbic Bank Zambia, hotel bookings in Dubai and Johannesburg, a series of cash withdrawals at automated teller machines inside 3 specific clubs in Northern Virginia, totaling $103,000 across 19 months. The fourth piece, and the one that would unmake his citizenship, was the application file. On his Form N-400, application for naturalization, submitted in early 2021, Muchimba had answered no to question 23. The question reads, "Have you ever committed, assisted in committing, or attempted to commit a crime or offense for which you were not arrested?" He had signed the form under penalty of perjury. He had repeated the answer in his naturalization interview at the USCIS Baltimore field office. He had stood in a federal courtroom in March 2022 and taken the oath of allegiance, swearing to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. By the date of that oath, federal records showed he had already deposited more than $450,000 in stolen checks. The lie was on the record. The proof was in his own bank accounts. The arrest warrant was signed on March 14, 2023. He was arrested at Dulles International Airport on the evening of March 16, 2023, at 9:11 in the evening, attempting to board Ethiopian Airlines Flight 501 to Addis Ababa with a connection onward to Lusaka. He was wearing dark jeans, a gray button-down shirt, and pulling a black-wheeled carry-on. The boarding pass in his hand was paid for in cash. His checked luggage, retrieved later from the airline's secure hold, contained $43,000 in U.S. currency wrapped in elastic bands, 3 Zambian passports in different name spellings, and a printed bank statement showing a transfer of $218,000 to an account at Stanbic Bank Zambia made earlier that week. The agents who approached him at the jet bridge identified themselves as Homeland Security Investigations. Agent: "Sir, can you step out of the line for me?" He stepped out. Agent: "Mr. Muchimba, I have a federal warrant for your arrest. Place your hands behind your back." Muchimba: "What is this about? I have a flight." Agent: "You are not getting on the flight, sir." Muchimba: "What are the charges?" Agent: "Mail theft, bank fraud, money laundering, unlawful procurement of naturalization." His face did not change. His shoulders did. They dropped a full inch. The boarding pass slipped from his fingers and landed on the carpet of the jet bridge. He did not pick it up. An agent picked it up for him and placed it in an evidence sleeve. Agent: "Mr. Muchimba, do you understand the charges I just read you?" Muchimba: "I want a lawyer." He did not say another word, not in the back of the federal vehicle that drove him from the airport to the FBI Washington field office, not during the booking process, not during the initial interview. He invoked his right to counsel and held to it for the next 18 months of pretrial proceedings. Those were the last words he spoke to federal investigators as a free man. The grand jury for the District of Columbia returned a 23-count indictment on April 27, 2023. Conspiracy: theft of mail by a postal employee under Title 18, United States Code, Section 1709. Bank fraud under Section 1344. Money laundering under Section 1957. Unlawful procurement of naturalization under Title 18, Section 1425. His defense attorney was a senior federal defender from the District of Columbia office. The defense strategy at trial was narrow. They did not contest that the checks had been stolen. They did not contest that the deposits had been made. They contested intent on the naturalization count, arguing that the application question had been ambiguous and that the defendant had not understood the legal definition of a crime he had not been arrested for. The jury did not accept it. The trial ran 9 days in May and June of 2025 before United States District Judge Rudolph Contreras. The government called 27 witnesses: postal supervisors from the Friendship Heights station, tellers from 3 banks, 2 handwriting examiners, a USCIS adjudications officer who had conducted his naturalization interview, 11 of the customers whose checks had been stolen. One of those witnesses was a 78-year-old retired State Department officer who had lived on Western Avenue for 31 years. He testified that the missing check, $2,800 from a quarterly federal annuity, had forced him to delay a cataract surgery by 4 months while he waited for the trace to clear and the duplicate to be reissued. He told the jury, in a voice that did not waver, that he had handed his outgoing mail to the defendant personally on more than one occasion. "I greeted him by name," he said. "I thought he was a good man doing an honest job." The jury returned guilty verdicts on every count. Sentencing was held on September 3, 2025. Judge Contreras spoke for nearly 12 minutes before he imposed the sentence. He addressed the defendant directly. "You were given access to the most personal correspondence of more than 30 households of strangers, on the simple assumption that you would be honest. You were given the opportunity to become a citizen of this country, on the simple assumption that you would tell the truth. You betrayed both of those assumptions at the same time, every single day, for more than 2 years. You wore the uniform of the United States Postal Service while you cashed checks that belonged to elderly retirees on your route. You raised your right hand and swore an oath to a constitution you were actively defrauding. This court does not see remorse in your conduct. It sees calculation." The sentence was 66 months in federal prison, $651,068.35 in restitution, forfeiture of more than $1.27 million in traceable assets, and, on the unlawful procurement count, the revocation of his United States citizenship under Title 8, United States Code, Section 1451. He will serve his sentence at a federal correctional institution to be designated by the Bureau of Prisons. Upon release, He will be transferred to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody for removal proceedings. He is expected to be deported to the Republic of Zambia. The citizenship he had stolen took 22 months to obtain. It took the court 4 words on the sentencing order to take it back. This case was brazen. But the case on the right side of your screen is on a level I still cannot believe is real. Click it now.